Do you know what I found? The more you know, the less you know.
All right, y'all, back with another one. Solo podcast for myself or whatnot, Today makes roughly about 2 weeks we got this thing kicked off or whatnot. And some stuff is really taking off on social media. Got a lot of people that's upset, of course. And a lot of people that really want to hear the truth or whatnot. So what I wanted to do is I just wanted to jump on here real quick and, share my thoughts and to let you guys know what my reason for actually becoming atheist consist of or whatnot. So I know a lot of people got a lot of questions. So I'm trying to clear air as much as possible or whatnot. So y'all will probably see me looking down at my phone or whatnot because I got some notes and stuff right here on my phone. It's just a lot easier for me to look at it and then just go through it, and just talk to it or whatnot. So yeah, let's get into it. So one of the first things that I thought about back when I was a believer or whatnot, in God or whatever you want to call it. I mean, because there's so many gods out there with different names, but God is pretty much a title for everything that's out there. So it's really like I said, it's a title more than anything. But I feel like if you're gonna have this one particular God that you decide to worship, then you should at least know the God's name and how to use it properly. I just think if you're gonna believe in something, then you should have enough respect for it to call it by its name. Don't just use some vague title like God or whatnot. But I don't want to get into that because that's really a long-winded path. But first things first here is, well, what made you become an atheist or a skeptic, Well, the first thing was I had a lot of questions about stuff that was embedded in my faith that I was told not to question. And as I got older and my mind started to grow and I started to look at things differently, especially, being away from my hometown and all that kind of stuff. So my thought process changed, I got more knowledge, got more involved with science and physics and all that kind of stuff. So I started questioning things. And I was religious at the same time. So it just struck me very odd that I wasn't able to question things because I was always told that, oh, it's a mystery or you ain't supposed to know or whatnot. And unfortunately, with my growth, that got to a point to where it just wasn't good enough for me. And I'm pretty sure some people out there that feel the same way when it comes to these type of conversations, when you have questions about stuff that's, embedded in your faith or whatnot, in your scriptures or whatnot, and then you're absolutely told that you can't question it. If you question it, then that automatically is a sin or whatnot, and it sets you up for hell because you're questioning your faith and all this type of stuff. Well, long story short, on the topic of this question, I started questioning some things that nobody wanted to give me answers to except for, oh, it's just supposed to be in your faith. That wasn't good enough for me. So me being me, I started doing some research, started looking at some stuff outside of my religious scriptures and all that kind of stuff. Find out about archaeology, anthropology, and all that kind of stuff. And the lights started coming on because I started finding answers or solutions to the questions that I had and the problems that I had. So that was the first thing, that I had to come into reason with, because once I started finding these things out, I ain't gonna lie to y'all, but I was really scared because I was thinking that I was gonna be punished for going outside of my faith, and I was automatically gonna go to hell. And you guys know the whole thing that comes with, question faith and all that kind of stuff. So once I got to a point to where I was satisfied with some of the questions and answers that I had obtained from my research, I started moving on in my journey. And a lot of my Facebook friends probably can attest to this as well. But as time went on, I deterred more away from the Holy Bible, and I got more into like the Hebrew background of things, to where I essentially was part of what they call a Hebrew roots movement. And true enough, that actually got me to the actual source of the God Yahweh and his origins and foundation and everything. And finding those things out it took me for a complete spin, because I was in a place to where, well, let me back up a little bit. So my initial faith, I was a Southern Baptist Christian or whatnot, raised in South Georgia, which I'm pretty sure a lot of my followers know this or whatnot. And I wanted to know where it came from. So I went in, found some scholars with PhDs and all this kind of stuff, and they were able to give me the information that I was looking for. So once I found out the foundations of where the Baptist denomination came from, it was a complete different spin for me, because I essentially found out that it is pretty much a downstream product of Roman Christianity or whatnot. And with me being a Southern Baptist, and I had no idea about the Holy Trinity and all that kind of stuff. I just always was taught that God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit was one. So I knew I had no aspects of the Holy Trinity or anything. So as my knowledge grew, I found out the foundation of where the Holy Trinity came from, through Roman Christianity. And that is what deterred me away from the Holy Bible, because as I dug into things, I found out that a lot of the things in the Holy Bible was changed or edited through translations over time. So I said that to say this. That is essentially how I got involved in the Hebrew roots movement. It was my decision to do that because I felt like the Hebrew roots movement was the true source of Yahweh, because we all know that the Bible, especially the Old Testament, was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and different, dialects of Hebrew or whatnot. So I felt like I was a lot closer to God, or Yahweh, as you want to call it, at that time. So the push that I was trying to get out to people was the truth. In other words, get away from the Holy Trinity. The Nicene Creed in Roman Christianity history is where the Trinity came from. I mean, there's some debates on that or whatnot, but logically, from my sources, that's where I got the understanding that not where Trinitarianism came from. You know, it was from the Holy Trinity, which came from the Nicene Creed. Now, there was different councils and all this kind of stuff that was actually before and after the Nicene Creed came into play or whatnot. And I don't want to get too long-winded on any of that stuff, but essentially finding out about the Nicene Creed was the reason why I wanted to get away from my Baptist roots. And I turned to the Hebrew roots movement and called myself getting closer to Yahweh. Well, once I got there, I had another question, you know, and my question to myself was, well, where did this come from? You know, I know the Hebrew is the original scriptures or whatnot, so let's go back and let's source this. So then I started finding out about Judaism, ancient Israelite religion, and all that kind of stuff. And my faith at the time, it took a turn, because I found out that a lot of the stuff that is even in Judaism today is a good way for me to put this is Judaism eventually took a radical turn during and after the Babylonian Persian exile or rule or whatever you want to call it. So I was able to find out that Yahwehism is actually what scholars call ancient Israelite religion. So since I wanted to get closer to Yahweh, I figured I needed to find out more about the details of where things changed, why things changed or whatnot. So I kept digging deeper, kept digging deeper. And then I eventually found out that the Yahweh that I was praising was not even the same. He wasn't depicted the same way by the Hebrew Israelites at first. And not only the Hebrew Israelites, but the Shasu and other nomadic cultures that were in the southern Levant at this time of history that I was, you know, sourcing or whatnot. So to find out that Yahweh basically migrated and turned into the God that everyone knows as God today sparked another question. So I wanted to know about his, where did he come from? Where did he start? You know, so I started digging farther and farther and farther. And eventually, from a scholarly perspective, I got the answer I was looking for. Now, did it deter my faith at the time when I found that out? No, I was still part of Hebrew roots movement, and it was a big thing to me, you know, and I was still a follower of Yahweh. And the reason is because there's actually archaeology out there that has evidence of Yahweh. You know, there's steles out there, there's Egyptian inscriptions that are out there that speaks of Yahweh or Yahoo or however you want to pronounce it. I'm gonna say that for another episode, because that whole Yahoo crowd, I got something for y'all. You know, not to take no shots at none of y'all, but that is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And just to touch one subject on it, first things first, in ancient Hebrew, you can't have back-to-back vowels anyway. So how can you have a who and a yah sound back-to-back? It's not even feasible if you know ancient Hebrew. So we're not even going to get into that or whatnot, and I don't want to portray that I'm smarter than anyone, but I know how people like to take that whole Yahoo, Yahuwah, Yahweh thing and try to spin it. And anyway, long story short, you know, let me blow that off right now. But so once I started getting a little bit more information about the origins of Yahweh and, you know, how he was originally depicted and to find out that he actually came on the scene as a war god and a storm god, that kind of sent me for another spin too. So I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me this God that I worship as God today was actually a storm god? So I started digging a little bit more, and I started finding more and more through anthropology and through scholars and all that kind of stuff about Yahweh and how he originally came. He was originally a storm war god or whatnot. So I would say at that point, when I found out Yahweh's origins, that's when my percentage meter on belief and faith started to increase. I'll say it that way, because at this point I've studied about the ancient Israelites. I've studied about their time in exile, how apocalyptic Judaism came out of exile, how Yahwehism went into exile, and how the religion was revamped by Jewish, priests and theologians and all that kind of stuff. And having this hard, tangible evidence from these scholars is what really caused me to start losing faith or whatnot. So now that I'm at the origins of Yahweh and I got a full understanding of that, me still wanting to hold on to the little bit of faith I had, the next thing I asked was, who really is or was this Jesus? So I ain't even gonna lie to y'all. I dug around in the Gospels, the New Testament scholars, historians, just anything you could pretty much think about on the New Testament. And I just kept coming up empty. So I'm like, why in the hell does this keep coming up empty? Like, it has to be a foundation and an origin of this stuff. So come to find out, the reason why I was coming up empty is because I was looking in the wrong place. For me to only discover that Christianity was really an early sanction off of Second Temple Judaism. So I've been studying Judaism all this time and had no idea that Christianity formed from Judaism. So I'm like, duh, CJ, that's what the answer is. So if you want to know how the early Christians depicted stuff, then you need to go and find and source the foundation of Christianity, which is its Jewish roots. So, behold, I go in and I start to gain information on how the Pharisees, the Jews, whatever you want to call them, how they depicted Jesus, okay? You can't really just go by one sanction of Judaism when you're trying to find out the truth, because, of course, we know the Pharisees, they didn't like Jesus. So whenever you look in sources like the Jerusalem Talmud or whatnot, it'll tell you that Jesus was a magician. They felt like he was a sorcerer, more like it. That wasn't the answer I was trying to get because of my faith at the time. So I started digging into other sources outside of Judaism. So I started looking at like Greek and Roman, like historians and theologians and all that kind of stuff. And I started finding out about Josephus and other, Jewish theologians or Jewish leaders and all this kind of stuff, to only find out that from a Jewish perspective, the Jews had a persona that a Messiah was going to come, which we know that rolled over into Christianity. But I'm going to back up here. The Jews had a depiction of who they thought a Messiah was or whatnot and it didn't turn out the way they thought it was or whatnot. So there was a number of people that came along that the Jews thought was the Messiah, like Judas of Galilee. He's an example. He was actually before Jesus or whatnot. So you can't really blame the Jews for not saying that Jesus was the Messiah. It's just the fact that this Jesus character had some followers or whatnot, and they actually thought that he was the son of man. And when he got killed for his troubles or whatnot, his legacy that he built grew. So you have to go and look at stuff from the foundation of where this stuff originated from. So at this point, I've thrown out everything from the Holy Bible mentally, all the Greco-Roman scriptures, as I call them, because we know that the New Testament was written in Greek or whatnot. So those are looked at in the scholarly world as Greco-Roman scriptures or whatnot, because we know that the Hebrew Bible was translated into the Septuagint years before we even got the New Testament. So there was already a Greek version of the Holy Scriptures, as some of y'all call them. I call it literature. You know, the Hebrew literature was translated into Greek way before the New Testament anyway. So they already had their hands on it. So I don't want to get into the continuation story on how I think Jesus came about, because I'm going to say that for another episode. But studying and finding out Jesus from his original Hebrew Jewish roots gave me a different spin on who I thought Jesus was. So that was the second thing that actually made my faith meter start to drop a little bit, because once I found out how Jesus was really depicted by sources outside of the Bible, I just felt like it was make-believe. You know, it's no different than all the metaphors and allegories that are that are in the Hebrew Bible, any Bible really, you know what I'm saying? Because to me, the Bible is just a theological book. You know what I'm saying? It has a lot of great metaphors and allegories in it, but it's not 100% truth or whatnot. And I'm going to say that for another episode as well. But moving on or whatnot. So at this point, I got the origins of Yahweh, and I'm looking at stuff about Jesus. So now I'm questioning the Holy Trinity at this point. So even though I've already looked into the Holy Trinity, now I'm really, really questioning all the details and stuff that I was taught as a Southern Baptist about the Holy Trinity, because knowing the origin of Yahweh, knowing the depiction of Jesus from his true Jewish background, and then knowing that the Holy Ghost was just, I'm not even going to say fornicated, but it was a switch from Hebrew, because Hebrew calls it a ruach instead of a ghost or a Holy Ghost, you know, and ruach just means wind or whatnot. So I don't know how you guys take that, but the way I took it was they made their own version of it. You know what I'm saying? The ruach is the true definition, but once I found out that the ruach was actually a part of Yahweh and it wasn't separate, and I'm like, how in the hell y'all got a Holy Trinity? It don't make no sense. You know what I'm saying? Because if the ruach is Yahweh and Jesus is the son of Yahweh, that's only two things to me, not three. So now my faith meter is probably at about 75% at this point, y'all. You know what I'm saying? So to restore my faith, I started looking into different denominations of Christianity outside of Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, and all this kind of stuff. So I find out about Unitarians. So I went down this whole road. I thought I was going to be a Unitarian, and I used to have debates with people that believed in the Trinity. I was in these Facebook groups about, God is one and the Son is not God and all this kind of stuff. Well, not Yahweh. And it played a big role on how I eventually became an atheist, because once I started digging more into the foundation of Unitarians, it just didn't sit right with me, and that part of my journey I was bummed out at that point. I didn't know how to come back from it at that point, So my next question was, all right, well, how do now that I understand the origins of all this stuff and the foundation of all this stuff, how am I going to find something to fit my narrative? Because I still wanted to believe, but I had to find something to fit my narrative. So at this point, Hebrew roots movement, Southern Baptist, believes in the Trinity. Hebrew roots movement, Unitarian. So I'm like, okay, what's next? The only thing that I can think of is I need to get to the truth through the original language of the Bible. So I go and I look at these different ways to start learning like Hebrew and all that. And I still can't read Hebrew fully to this day, but I'm good enough to look at something and I can tell if the Hebrew language dialect from the way it's being written has been changed. So once I got good enough to do that, I started digging around in ancient manuscripts. And that's how I find out about the most arcane remnants of the Bible. And I found out I was actually able to use that once I understood it and backtrack it to the origins of Yahweh. Because remember, I said he was originally a storm war god. So when you look at the arcane remnants of the Bible, which is the book of Judges, Samuel, and I think it may be, I can't remember. Don't quote me on that for sure. But the depiction I get from those two books lines up completely with Yahweh being a war god, because they got these songs and it seems like they're amping themselves up to go into war and all this kind of stuff. So now I'm really flabbergasted at this point. So now, not only do I backtrack and go back and start questioning the origins of Yahweh, but I want to understand more in detail on what the Jews did with the ancient literature, because now I can tell. So back to what I was saying before, I go into these ancient manuscripts and I start looking, and I can see personally, this didn't come from no scholar. I can personally see edits. Something is originally scribed in ancient Hebrew, and then it goes to Paleo Hebrew. Like, give you an example. This book, the name on the front of this book, that's Yahweh, but that's in Paleo Hebrew. That's not in ancient Hebrew. So when you go and you look at some of the books and you see Yad-He-Veh-He, or however you want to say it, in the actual Hebrew scribe, the description on how they wrote it, and then all of a sudden, a few books later, it's not written in that dialect no more. It's written like the dialect I showed you on the front of this book. So that tells me somebody changed it. It's not hard to see that kind of stuff, people, once you understand this stuff. So all you people that's on here talking about he don't know what he talking about, and oh, there was no afterlife and that stuff, it was afterlife in the Old Testament, that's a damn lie. Okay? Because let me rephrase this. The most arcane remnants of the Hebrew Bible does not speak of afterlife. Period. Yeah, true enough, a lot of those books in the Old Testament in the Hebrew Bible were finished being published during the Persian rule. And we know that there was a shift from ancient Israelite religion, Yahwehism as scholars call it, to apocalyptic Judaism during the exile. History tells us that. I don't have to make this up. So if you go and you understand the timelines on when these scholars say these books were written, you will have a great understanding on how apocalyptic literature got into the Old Testament during and after the exile. It's common sense, people. But y'all want to get on here and try to beat me and bash me on my little TikTok video or whatnot, you know, trying to say I'm wicked and all this kind of stuff when y'all don't even pick up a book. Pick up a book. That's all I can say to you. So now that I done figured this out, because I understand the language and the changes, now I want to figure out and find out why was there such a radical change from ancient Israelite religion, Yahwehism, to Judaism. So I started digging, and then I find out that from a theology reason, the Israelites changed their theology on Yahweh for multiple reasons. One is because they had a Deuteronomy contract with Yahweh. So it was like, hey, you watch out for us as our God, you keep us safe, and we'll praise you. That's how y'all got the old covenant. That's where the old covenant comes from in the Old Testament. It's from the Deuteronomy vassal contract that the Israelites had with Yahweh. You don't believe me? Go look this stuff up. That's how Yahweh was able to even exist as their God once the exile happened. Because guess what? In ancient culture, if someone came in and conquered your land and kicked your ass, guess what? The God that you worship there in that temple on that land that was conquered was supposed to vanish. So the Jews didn't want to get rid of Yahweh as their God because they had this vassal contract. So they had to stay obligated to this contract from a theology standpoint. So all the theologians and everything or whatnot during the exile, it took a radical spin because of the influence that came from the Persian religion, Zoroastrianism. And I know y'all probably tired of me beating this with a dead horse. But if you go study Zoroastrianism, it will show you and you will understand the concept of your heaven and hell, your angels and your demons, your Satan, And God being one being an evil God, one being a good God. They even have a Messiah in their religion, people. Christianity, the exact same thing. Zoroastrianism was thousands of years before Christianity or whatnot. So knowing that these Jews were in Babylon, Persia, because let's take a little history lesson here. We know that the Babylonians beat the Jews and the Babylonians took the Jews into exile. Well, the Persians came along and they decimated the Babylonians and got rid of them. So the Jews were already there when that happened. So when the Persians came in and beat the Babylonians, the Jews praised them. Matter of fact, history tells us that when King Cyrus gave the Jews permission to go back to Judea, they were being treated so well in Persia, they didn't even want to go. So if they're getting along with the Persians that well, what in the hell make you think that the Zoroastrianism, which was the number one religion in the Persian Empire, Zoroastrianism was there in Persia when the Jews was there. What make you think that that didn't influence them theologians, considering that they had lost to Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon? Something had to punish Nebuchadnezzar. You know what I'm saying? Because they ancient stuff that they was looking at, they didn't even have no heaven and hell. They just had Sheol, which is a grave. There was no reward for afterlife in ancient Israelite religion in Yahwehism. That took a big spin in the apocalyptic Judaism format. People, this stuff is not hard to understand. It really is not. So going back to what I was just saying, so since these Jewish theologians we know were, I mean, come on, people, use common sense. If you got some people that come in and they beat your enemy and they get rid of your ops or whatnot, you ain't gonna praise these people. That's exactly what the Jews did. They praised the Persians for what they did. And guess what? Well, hey, they got this religion over here. They God must be stronger than our God. They got something going on that we don't know about. So you get a case of syncretism. So now all of the beliefs and foundations of Zoroastrianism has been synced into Judaism. People, it's right there in plain sight if you really want to know this stuff. So now I'm at the point to where now that I know that everything that came out of apocalyptic Judaism is man-made, then I started sourcing books like this because I wanted to know more about the apocalyptic literature. And I sit and I read these books and I get this knowledge. And just because it's in this book don't mean I necessarily believe it. I go fact check it myself, people. I go fact check it. You think I just pick something up and read it and ta-da, I just believe it? No, I don't. I go back and I fact check this stuff for months, not days, not even weeks, months. So now guess what? I'm to the point to where now I know the origins of Yahweh as a storm god and a war god. And the most arcane remnants of the Bible tell us this. And I have the timeline from scholars on when these books were written. So now I can go and start syncing this stuff together and putting a puzzle together. So this happened before the exile, doesn't speak of none of this stuff, goes into exile, comes out of exile. Now you got all this apocalyptic literature and stuff. And you can't have common sense to see that stuff made up. Angels, demons, heaven, hell, afterlife, your Messiah. Did you know that this apocalyptic literature right here speaks of Yahweh Katan, which is a lesser form of Yahweh in human form? It was apocalyptic literature, people. Only thing they had to do is just take it from Zoroastrianism. I just told you Zoroastrianism had a Messiah too. It's like comparing apples to apples, people. Y'all just don't want to believe it. And you don't have to. But if you go out there and you start doing this research, you're going to see what's up. And once I find out about the apocalyptic literature and the rituals that were practiced in ancient Israelite theophany through them same prophets that y'all say, oh, the prophets had visions and all this stuff came true, that these prophets, man, all that stuff was post hoc. All them visions and them prophecies and all that stuff was written during the Persian rule. And let me clear this up when I say this, because a lot of people say, oh, that's not right. A lot of the arcane remnants of the Bible, and when I say arcane remnants, I mean started and finished during Yahwehism. Okay? All of your prophets, those books were started either during Yahwehism or at the beginning of the exile. And then they feed down, and then they are finished and published after the exile. So let me be very clear when I say that. That's how we know that these edits have occurred, because you can look at 1st Isaiah and 2nd Isaiah, and you can tell that there's a dialect change in the Hebrew and the way it's written. Same thing with the other prophets too. The biggest one is Daniel. Everyone like to go back to the Daniel prophecies and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? Yeah, that book was started during the Persian rule and was completed after the Persian rule. So, guys, when you hear me say after or during the Persian rule, I'm talking about apocalyptic Judaism is what I'm talking about. So you start seeing, notice how when the Israelites had theophany, Moses is a great example of theophany. Tell me one time Moses had a vision. He didn't, because Yahweh talked to him directly. That's what theophany is, people. Okay, so just so you know. Theophany is when the God talks directly to someone, and then that person delivers the message that the God told him. Okay? Theophany migrated to Mirabakah mysticism. Okay? Which we know those practices of mysticism was practices that the Jews done to ascend and transcend mentally to Yahweh. We got proof of that in temples that were destroyed. When they went in and they find cannabinoids inside the temples, what other way were they going to transcend and ascend to Yahweh? If y'all saw me doing a mystic trick right now, y'all will say I'm doing witchcraft or I'm crazy or whatnot. It don't change, people. It's the same stuff. Except for it's in some scriptures and y'all want to take it like it's the Holy Grail. When it's not. It's no different than any other mythology or religion that's out there. Period. So getting back to the reason I done this video, that is what caused me to be an atheist. Once I figured that out, that was the only so-called God that I followed for almost 40 years. People, as a Baptist Christian, not wanting to deter away from my faith. And then when you go in and you start finding out the origins and foundations of this stuff, how it came about, who made it, mysticism and apocalyptic literature, plus this, when you got actual scholars and people that's going over and doing research and dedicating their life to live in Israel to find out this stuff. Come on, people. It's not hard. So that's why I'm an atheist. And that's why I'm going to continue to be an atheist. Because the truth is outside of these Bibles, people. And if you really want the truth, your Bible ain't going to give it to you. I hate to tell you that. It is not going to give it to you. I got to take a pause for right now because I wasn't expecting this to turn out this way. I wasn't expecting to get this far into detail on this kind of stuff, but I wanted to clear the air on this. You know, you TikTokers and you Instagrammers and all this kind of stuff, and you jump on here and you don't know shit about your foundation of your, about the foundation of your religion. So you better find somebody else to play with, because I ain't the one. I'll hurt your damn feelings. I say that a lot. I will hurt your feelings. I am your worst nightmare. Okay? Find somebody else to play with, man. Find somebody else to play with. Yahweh made up. Jesus. It's 8,000 different stories of him. You mean to tell me all of them right? You got heresies, you got Gnostics, you got Christians, you got Roman Catholics. There's so many different denominations of who Jesus was. You know why so many denominations of who Jesus was? Because he wasn't real, people. That's why. Yeah, he was a real person. Let me back up and say that. He was a real person, but he was no different than you and me. He just had more Instagram followers than us. That's all it is. There's no such thing as salvation. That came from apocalyptic literature, people. Go read this book if you want to know about it. This is a great reading book right here. Shout out to Mitchell Reddish, because he freed me with that book. And go read and find out how they talk about Metatron and Yahweh Catan in the apocalyptic literature, which I said earlier in the episode, which is a lesser human form of Yahweh. They had already had this stuff planned out during the Persian rule. When I say they, I mean Jewish priests, theologians, and all of them. If they the ones who wrote the story and this man came along and died and they say he wasn't the Messiah, how the hell y'all gonna take it and spin it and try to make him the Messiah? The Romans made him the Messiah to y'all. That's why y'all love the Holy Bible. It's the #1 selling book. I'm pretty sure it is. And I know why that is too. And I'm going to say that for another episode. But you can't be mad at the Romans for that. They smart people. They're smart. They knew about strength in numbers. That's why their armies and their churches were tied together. And guess what? They still got the biggest church today because of you Christians. But if you could see through and know history, see through the dumb shit and pick up a book or go take an actual history lesson, go back to 1st century AD. Tell me what happened during the Jewish Roman revolt. They took y'all's God and turned it to their God, and now y'all worship it as Jesus Christ. Don't believe me? Go look it up. And that's all I got for today. That's all I got. I done enough as it is. So anybody got anything to say, drop a comment, like, share, subscribe, with all that, whatever that fancy stuff is when it comes to this YouTube stuff or whatnot. But this is why I'm an atheist. And it all started with questions that nobody wanted to answer. And I'm actually glad it happened, because guess what? I'm free. I'm at peace. Because guess what? I don't have to worry about being judged or going to a heaven or hell or worrying about if I check somebody for treating me wrong or looking at me wrong, that I'm supposed to turn the other cheek. Boy, they did that shit to control y'all. And y'all letting them do it. Turn the other cheek. Fuck that. Who? What? No. But guess what? I still got morality. Without religion. I do what's right. I still take care of the homeless. I still help people out. And you think I'm looking for a blessing? Get out of here. Your God has nothing to do with morality. It has nothing to do with consciousness. How you think. Any of that. I'm free from all of the torment that y'all go through. And then y'all say, you born in sin? How does that even make sense? You're born in sin. So if you're born in sin, you're automatically going to hell. According to your God. Make it make sense, people. And everyone sins because a man and woman ate off of a tree? Are you serious? So you gonna punish everybody for that? Man, come on. Y'all better leave them fairy tales alone. Y'all don't believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, do y'all? So why the hell you gonna let somebody else make a fairy tale up for you and you end up believing it? Make it make sense. I don't know. I ain't gonna poke the bear too much no more or whatnot. But I wanted to clear the air on why CJ became an atheist. CJ became an atheist because CJ understands the foundation and origins of religion, where it came from, how it started, how it migrated over time, how it's depicted today, how men and women have took their ideology and spin things in order to gain control. That's why CJ's an atheist. Not because I'm mad at God for my dad dying. I heard some of y'all say that out there too. Oh, he just mad at God. It has nothing to do with my dad dying. First of all, you got to believe in a God to be mad at one. People. Oh, his heart is so hardened. I ain't Pharaoh. Stop comparing me to that shit in the Bible. That's a myth anyway. Y'all take that book and you just believe everything in it. No wonder it's the number one selling book. It's the most corrupt book in the world. I'd be the number one seller too. And let's not talk about how the churches own the publishing companies. I'm going to say that for another episode. Because guess what? During early Christianity, before the Romans and stuff took over it, you couldn't get it because you didn't have enough money to get it. But the Romans changed that for y'all. They did. They did. They made it real easy. And then they worked with different people. And they start publishing Bibles. So yeah, it's the number one selling book in the world. It ought to be the number one selling book in the world. Just because of the way they did everything. Mission accomplished, people. And y'all too dumb to see it. Keep buying your holy Bibles. Keep your faith in your original war god, storm god that migrated over time through the Abrahamic religions. And now he's the God that billions of people call God today. And y'all don't even know where he came from. Then on top of that, you don't even know the foundation of the scriptures. You don't even know how to fucking read the scriptures. At least I can look at them. But you know why? Because I wanted to know. That's why. Because I got tired of having the wool pulled over my face by people that just says, oh, you just supposed to have faith. Well, guess what? Faith ain't good enough for me. And it never will be. Because faith, we know, is belief in something without evidence. And that ain't good enough for me. I won't settle. And for the people out there that know me, you know I ain't never been the type of person to settle for something. So once I woke up and said I wasn't settling for no damn religion, I became free. And ain't nothing in my household changed. I still got a lovely wife that loves me with no problem. We have these conversations all the time. My kids, if I'm so bad, why half of y'all trying to live like me? Huh? Answer that question. Since you hate the atheist so much, why are you out here trying to live like an atheist? I must got something you want. And I do. Peace and freedom. Because I ain't worried about no sky daddy looking down on me, telling me I'm going to hell because I masturbated 15 years ago. Y'all better wake up, man. And secondly, leave me the fuck alone. And I'm out.